Good morning, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Geoffrey Muindi, CEO for Dive Marketing, which is a marketing agency that does 360 engagement. So I'm honored to be the one moderating this session. I want to salute everyone who has gotten an opportunity to join this live session that will be discussing the gambling taxation environment in Africa as compared to Europe. I want to echo and congratulate our panelists who are here to help us delve further into discussion of this particular topic. Without uh, without a means of wasting our time, we want to jump into it, and we gather today as experts in the industry. We want to share invaluable insights and expertise in our areas of our operation, so that we give different perspectives on this particular topic. I will be moderating the session that is going to for the next 45 minutes to 1 hour. Stay tuned, and there will be a question. If you have a question, an observation, you can put it on the chat, and we are going to address it at the end of the session. I would like to give each one of the panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves as we move into the discussion.
Thank you. I want to say thank you to iGaming Africa for giving me this opportunity to be part of the panelists this morning. My name is David Ukairo. I work with Mondogaming XR as a business development manager for African markets. I have experience in iGaming industry as I've worked. I have 10 years experience in iGaming industry, and I've worked in different capacity, and also I've played a vital role in B2B business. Thank you.
So I'd like to thank iGaming Africa as well for inviting us to this webinar today. So my name is Felix Mulandi. I've been in the sports betting industry and casino gaming industry as well for close to 8 years. So I have vast experience generally in sports betting, casino gaming, marketing strategy formulation and execution. When it comes to strategic operations as well, and customer success, like we all know in the gaming industry, when it comes to the customer experience, that's the number one factor that most users usually look up to. So well versed in this as well, and really glad to be here and looking forward to the conversation. Thank you.
My name is Oyindamola Michaels. I'm an iGaming consultant / professional. I have about 10 years experience cut across the continent, managing brands, big brands across the continent, from operations to financial to marketing, market entry, strategy execution, P&L ownership, and the likes, yeah, for casino, betting, lottery, virtual games, yeah. So basically, it's a great joy in my heart that I'm pleased to be part of this webinar to further share knowledge to listeners and the continent at large. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, our panelists, for introducing yourself. Just to mention that this webinar is sponsored by Aviatrix, a Crash Games company. And we go straight to our discussion. And I want to throw this to David. Could you perhaps share your on the tax environment in the gambling sector in Africa as compared to Europe? Just give your perspectives on your observations. What are some of the differences that we could note between Africa as compared to Europe in terms of the tax environment? David, can you unmute?
Yeah, I said the taxation environment can vary due to the different in regulatory framework, economic conditions, and cultural attitude towards the gambling. It is very important to know that the taxation policies varies from country to country within each continent, right? So from the Africa, the very regulatory landscape, Africa has a diverse regulatory landscape with different approaches to gambling regulators across countries. Some nations has comprehensive regulatory framework, while others have limited, no regulators at all. Taxation, one of the things we can consider again is that the taxation rate, and also, sorry, hello, can you hear me? So one of the things you can check also is information in gambling. In many African countries, information gambling activities such as traditional games and small-scale betting are prevalent. These activities often operate outside the formal regulatory framework and may not be subjected to specific measures. So we look at the socio-economic factors. While in Europe, you can see, Europe is has established regulatory framework. They also have a harmonized environment and high taxation rates. So online gambling in Europe has witnessed significant growth in online, prompting countries to adapt their taxation policies to the digital landscape. Some European jurisdictions have implemented specific tax on online gaming activities, focusing on the location of the operators or the customers. So you can see the European countries have advantage compared to the African market, because let me see the let me say it is okay. Let me add this. It is crucial for us to remember that these points provide general overview, and the specific taxation policy in African countries or Europe nation can differ substantially. To gain a more accurate understanding of the taxation environment, it is necessary to examine legislation and policies of individual countries within each continent, right? So in Africa, we have South Africa, Kenya's, which have a good framework, and also equally Nigeria. Also, they're one of the countries that have a good framework that can compete, if not fully, but partially with the European markets. I think I have to stop here. I think I have to stop here.
Mentioned that the gambling taxation is way vast, and it keeps on evolving, especially in the African countries. Could Felix, can you paint a picture on what is your observation? What are your thoughts on the tax environment within Africa as compared to Europe?
Okay, thank you, Geoffrey, for the question. So basically, even from an operational perspective, looking at when investors are trying to come into Africa per se, it's really important to look at the regulatory frameworks that each regulator has put in place. So right now in Africa, we have various tax policies being implemented across. So for instance, we have countries like Ghana and Nigeria that are trying to incorporate different taxes, maybe tax increases, where we have countries like Kenya that is well versed and has already incorporated taxes. That's gaming taxes when it comes to land-based casinos and also online casinos, as well as online sports betting farms. So we have GGR that is being taxed on this as well. So all these factors, and the thing is, keeps changing on on a yearly basis. Like right now in Kenya, we have the finance bill that is coming up, and whereby they're looking to increase the excise tax from 7.5% to 20%. So the thing is, when it comes to Africa, it's not that well stabilized, but as compared to countries in Europe, whereby the tax is well regulated. We have, like in the UK, we don't have basically no tax that the funds charge users, and especially even when you, like a good example is when you go and place a bet maybe in Las Vegas, you are also able, they don't consider it like it's income generating activity. So basically, uh, as compared to Africa, compared to Europe, I'll say that Europe is well structured and they have good frameworks. However, considering that Africa is an emerging market, I'm sure in the coming future we'll be able to be stabilized, and really looking forward to the next future. Yeah.
I agree with you. Then, Africa is growing. Africa is evolving in terms of the gaming industry. Just to throw this to Michael, could you also give your perspective on the tax environment in Africa and Europe, as also and also give us, in terms of tax policies, what lessons can Africa learn from Europe, so that we be able to move in the same space, in the same speed with Europe, in terms of harmonizing the environment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. So it's quite very simple, right? Yeah, it is abysmal and appalling that we've still not gotten it right in Africa in terms of our regulations or our taxations. We come every time, conferences, webinars, to discuss about how Africa needs to get it right in terms of meeting up with European standards, right? But what our government or our regulators have failed to understand is that the industry, the betting industry in Africa, is a money generating business or sector for the economy, job employment, boosting of the economy and all that. But one way or the other, the government keeps trying to increase tax to push away the companies or push away foreign investments or local investments out of the company. The European market is well regulated. So for example, Russia doesn't even tax their operators. That's why you see most companies trying to come up or emerge from Russia. They give their indigenous or investors a soft landing in terms of building companies and the likes, right? You have companies like Spain that does 15% on revenue, fixed amount for years so that companies can plan. But in Africa here, what you get is that this year they are doing 15%. Next year, when they see, oh, the money is too much, or they need to wet some hands, or elections are coming up, they increase it to 25% or try to get money from everywhere, right? Tax everybody anyhow. The essence of the taxation is not even understood. Yeah, here in Nigeria, for example, you have double taxation. The national institution will tax you, the state would tax you, and they still want us to collect VAT on whatever it is that they're giving you. You have countries in Africa that are paying winning taxes or gaming tax. Uganda just recently increased their taxes to 30%. What is the idea behind this? Are they trying to frustrate the business out of their country? Why then you issue license, or why can't you regulate it and give a fixed amount so that companies can plan? So the whole idea of taxation in Africa and Europe, for me, is still a long stretch, right? We have a lot to do on the continent, right, to get it right. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Provoking idea, the insights that you've given to us. And again, looking at what is happening in African countries, I would say mostly the gaming industry and the gaming environment. I think it is somehow misconstrued to perhaps it needs a lot of intervention from experts. And that's why the reason why iGaming Africa is bringing up this kind of discussions, so that we may discuss what are the different policies that we need to implement as Africa for us to have a conducive environment for both investors, the players, and also the service providers. Just to jump into delve further, we shift our focus to the just to understand the implications of taxation policies to the players, to the investors, and also to the other stakeholders who are the providers of the platforms. What do you think, Mulandi, could be the implications of these taxation policies that are being implemented in Africa and perhaps in parts of Europe? What could be the implication of these taxes to the players, to the investors trying to come in the African market, and also to the providers, service providers who are giving out platforms? What do you think if, like the case for Uganda, the increase of 30% GGR, and also the Kenyan proposal of the 20% on excise duty? What do you think is the head game? What do you think could be the implication in the investors side, and also the players and the service providers? Felix.
All right. Yeah, so thank you, Geoffrey, again for that question. So I'll tackle it bit by bit. So let me start off with investors' perspective. So for investors, first of all, investors become wary of investing in certain markets whereby they're not really sure, like in the next future, what will happen in terms of the taxation. So it really longs the process of decision making for these investors, and in the process, they end up not investing, and ultimately the government is the one that loses, because no new businesses are being done in the country. We don't create new employment as well. So whenever the existing investors per se also, like for instance, there's that specific time in Kenya when we had big sponsorships happening. We had the big football teams being sponsored to good tunes. That meant that we had sports development in the country is not being taken to the next level. So with lots of sponsorships, that happens. We also have, like in Kenya, we are really big in jackpots. So what happens is whenever the revenue that the company generates, even the payouts when it comes to pools like the jackpots, the kind of give outs that they'll give, really you'll see that even right now, the kind of bonuses that is being given really diminishes. So that's a return to player when it comes to pools. So that really happens. And then also, when it comes to the actual players, the users, that as much as gambling is really viewed as a form of entertainment, so you'll really find that users, if someone was placing a bet with $1 or $2, he'll try to reduce that, just basically to maximize his possibility of winning. So he will really keep placing bets, however in small amounts, and ultimately the economy is the one that suffers. And you find that, for me, as much as it's good to have these taxes being implemented in various jurisdictions, it's usually good to have public participation and participants, let's say all have a quorum of all parties involved, so that at least you have forge a good regulatory framework so that the industry can strive and all these things can play. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Felix, for shedding more light on that. Yes, I agree with you. When you boast more taxes, the only there are very ways of perhaps demoralizing people. The players, of course, will be demoralized. The investors will now look to leverage on risk, so we'll have to perhaps give a very high hopes and so forth and so forth. When you look at what is happening, we've realized in the past weeks exit from the market, especially in Kenya. In Uganda, we've seen PulseBet is exiting the market. A couple of players are exiting the market. Michael, could you perhaps give us your perspective? Could the tax issue be the one leading that is making most of the investors that like Betway exiting the market? could that environment, how do we correct it? And how the governments in Africa can be able to address this issue so that we don't chase out most of these investors, because we've realized that there is a lot of jobs have been lost. Our friends out here now, they were having, last month they were working, now they don't have the jobs. It is going to bring a ripple effect in the job environment. So, what do you think should be addressed by the government in Africa?
So first of all, the government is greedy. Like I said, we have a greedy government. We have greedy governments across Africa, across the continent in Africa. Greed is actually what it is. It's not. They're not trying to. They're not trying to help the populace by saying, oh, they're trying to reduce the betting or the stigma across betting. For me, I think it is basically just greed in order to enrich themselves or fatten their pocket. Now, I'm not saying taxing is not a good thing. Yes, people need to pay their tax, but why are you paying taxes on, for example, on stakes, right? You know, the stakes, for example, is just money that your customers have played to you. If you want to put a tax, you put your tax on maybe winnings. Right now, you get government also still trying to put taxes on winnings, saying the customers must pay some certain amounts in some countries. Now, what this will do is that you get customers that would, you know, stop playing with companies, right, and start playing with companies overseas that they don't tax them or they don't play, right? Because we know we have some operators that take traffic, right, which is also against the law, and I'm sure that's another topic for another time. But they take traffic away from our continent, right, and provide services for them, right, without anybody, you know, charging them or taxing them, or the government does not even do anything about these people. But for investors that have come into your country, you want to kill them with taxes. So for me, it is for the government to get their onuses right, and, you know, make a research, do a research, look at what what is happening in developed countries, how they manage their taxation on gambling, and find a working document across that and implement here, right? It's simple as that. Nobody is saying, oh, do not tax, but overtaxing people, you're trying to run them out of their business. And most of these operators have group of businesses in other regions, in other continents. So shutting down one of their business in Africa would not affect their business overall. It would affect the people of that country. So at the end, is the government trying to help us, or are they trying to destroy us? Basically, that's my contribution. And yeah, a lot of times we've had these conversations with government. Sorry, I just want to quickly answer the question I'm saying on the dashboard. I think it kind of speaks to what I'm talking about, Mr. Moderator, right? So a lot of times we've had, and you guys, my panelists, co-panelists can bear me witness, you know, we've had seminars and conferences where these regulators are there, right? You know, I've gotten a regulator from a particular country actually exchange numbers. I wanted to know how taxation is done. You know, I had several meetings with him. I think I don't want to mention names, but it's from Tanzania, right? Several meetings with him on how taxation should be done, what is happening in our country, what is happening in some European countries, what the best way is moving forward. And the only thing we got was reduction of tax from a certain amount to 10%, right? But you're still taxing other parts of the business. So the idea is they have to agree within themselves that they are willing to change this. It's not about just having meetings with them and sitting down with them. We've done that through the association of sports betting operators, through individual people, right, or through conferences and all that. But they don't listen. The president still tells them what they want to do or how they want to get money, and it needs to be done. So basically, it has to be from within. It has to be a decision that the government is making. Maybe when they see the number, maybe job employment or unemployment data has increased to 40 or 50% in their country, and they will understand that, oh, these guys are helping us and not just killing us. Thank you.
Your contribution. I just want to throw the same question to David because this is a guy who has been in the industry for quite a while. You've interacted with different people across the African sphere. What do you think with this taxation? Is it sustainable if the government continue taxing the investors? And what do you think is going to be the implication on the player and perhaps the service providers, the casino providers, the sportsbook providers, the crash game providers? If we continue with this taxation that is not being harmonized in Africa, every other country is waking up and imposing their own taxation. What do you think is it's an impact on a player, an investor, and also a service provider? Because it's the same ecosystem that we operate in.
Thank you, Geoffrey, for giving me this opportunity once more again. I must tell you, the biggest challenge we have here in Africa is we have regulators that are novice in the business, and they refuse to learn. So what they want to do is just to get the regulators that are novice in the business, and they don't want to learn. And what they want to do is just to make money, to take money from investors, from companies, and the rest of it. And if this continues, right, if this continues, it will affect the business. It will affect the investors. It will affect the employed in the country. And it also will even affect the government, because at the end of the day, either the operator or the provider will be looking around the best possible way to bypass the taxation and also to bypass some regulatory laws, looking at as in taking a back cut. So for me, I think the best for them to do is to harmonize everything, right? Because one, you can see, as my colleague said the other time, that in some places like in Nigeria, you find out states we have double taxation in Nigeria. Even some other states in Nigeria do the same also. So how do you expect them to grow? So if I'm going to another state to start up my business, I have to pay huge sum of money, and they'll be making references to other states that you're operating. So this will affect us drastically if we don't do the needful now. And there's nothing stops us from learning. We learn every day. Even we in the industry, when we started this business, we started learning from somewhere, and we got to where we are today, right? So if the governments don't train their staffs, because if you find out most of the staffs working in the government sector that are doing these policies, and most of them don't go for training. Most of them don't even seek or don't even consult like the European countries and the rest of those that are doing it very well. They just feel within their own perspective they can do what they think they can do, and nobody can stop them. As my colleague said, we'll be looking at when the elections is coming, they will be looking at where to get money from and the rest of it. And this affects the business. Like what happened recently in Kenya when one or two of the brand left Kenya because of taxation. Nobody will grow, no business will grow when there is double taxation or heavy taxation. It will not grow. No investor will put money where he or she will not make profits, because the essence of doing business is to make profits. So with double taxation, this will not help us in Africa, right? It will not help us in Africa. So we are looking at how government can come back or even call the stakeholders and hold meetings and let the stakeholder tell them what to do. Because if they don't know, they can tell them, or they bring in consultants from the European that will help them out from all this. And by so doing, I think Africa will get a balance. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, David. That's a good perspective. And I think I agree with you. We need to get some level of harmonization across Africa. And there's a question and I want Mulandi to address this. Is there an opportunity for industry players and stakeholders to sit down with the government across Africa to come up with ways and policies to harmonize the taxation bit? Because I think it is the animal in the house and is the one chasing people, the investors, so to speak. from Africa? Is there an opportunity to sit down with the various government? Are they willing to sit down? Are they willing to sit down and listen to us? Are there ways we can perhaps sit down together from an expert point of view and help to bring the government and the players to a sit down and address the issues affecting the industry?
Yes, thank you, Geoffrey, for the question. So I think Michael had also touched on that question during his first, but then generally speaking, yes, and we have, like, for instance, and giving, for example, in Kenya, previously we had the likes of Felix, who had all industry players converge in a conference, and also invited the regulator, that's BCLB, and had one-on-one talks. And just whenever, my thinking is generally, whenever all industry players converge and come up with ideas, they're able to come up with ideas and advise the government on how best to approach it. Because, like I had said initially also, what happens is, when we have these over-taxation per se, because again, no one is against the taxing bit. However, it's good to always hear and from all parties, just to align and make sure that whenever you're coming up with a framework, is a framework that is workable, that favors even businesses, so that, because again, we want investors to come to the country and make investments. So definitely there's that opportunity for dialogue. So it's all about availing and having these conferences. I know we are right now, we are not in that position whereby at this particular moment we can be able to have these kind of conversations and get listened to. But I'm sure in the next future, once they see the need of the industry and what kind of impact it's creating to the society, the kind of jobs creation, like I said, like right now we have a technological advancement in terms of looking at the betting industry. We have machine learning, we have the AI that is coming up. So, and also businesses that are being set up. So I think right now it's not possible to have these conversations, but I think in the future, after the impact has been felt, I think we'll be in that position. And just also to touch on also a question that has also been asked by one of our listeners. So for Kenya right now, there's the increase in tax that has been proposed in the finance bill. We also have the finance the bills in Uganda that are also increase, a 10% increase from 20 to 30. So the thing is, in Africa, most countries tend to benchmark based on countries that are well advanced in certain fields. However, it's good if we can really borrow the approach that European countries have really employed in when it comes to gaming, in terms of technology, in terms of taxation, because ultimately, as an economy, we'll all benefit once we involve all parties and bring everyone to the table so that they can air their own opinions.
Great, great. I think, Sajan, we've answered your question. There's a question here on the screen, David. They are asking if, Sajan is asking, if there is an increase in tax in Kenya, do you think the other African countries will just go the same way and increase perhaps those who don't have the excise duties? Do you think, do you see them in introducing excise duties? Do you think they will go ahead and increase their taxes in terms of GGR, the withholding taxes? What do you think? What do you make of this?
Thank you, Geoffrey. I must say it is possible, because you find out African countries replicate themselves in terms of policies and the rest of it, right? In terms of taxation and the rest of it, because they want to copy. If it's worked out for Kenya, I wouldn't mind. I will see other African countries replicating the same thing. That is just the key. If it works out for them, because they will want to see Kenya as a testing ground to see what other operators we do, and other foreign investors or foreign brands we do. If they still remain in Kenya, or if they do if they accept that increase in tax and it is successful, I tell you, other African nations will copy the same and do the same. But if they don't, everybody will amend their regulation. They will amend their own framework for them to be able to catch new investors in Africa, in their country, or in their country. They will be able to catch new investors. So I think that is just it, because if you allow it, they will do the same. That's just Africa for you. They will replicate the same thing if it works for Kenya. Everybody likes something good, right? If it works and everybody accepts it, they want to do the same, even do more. Because they'll be looking at, oh, you can make XYZ amount from my country. So if you can make this XYZ amount from my country, you too, you can. And the painful part of it is this: they don't consider the payouts. That is the the painful part of it. They don't consider payouts, right? When they're doing this, they don't consider the payouts the operators do most times. So it's challenging, right? Thank you. Thank you.
Great, David. Yes, I don't know what is your perspective, Michael, on the same. Do you think these other countries in Africa? Don't forget, I just want to combine this. There are countries in Africa that we are perhaps, I would suggest if other governments can try to copy from them or benchmark from them. That's a word. If you look at Mauritius, if you look at Seychelles, there are certain things they do to address and make sure the gambling industry is not targeted. I would use the word targeted because in my country, I think the gambling sector, the alcohol sector, the cigarette sector has been targeted as the only some of the industries that will raise revenue in terms of taxes. What do you make of this particular animal code taxes? Do you think other countries might copy what Kenya and perhaps Uganda is doing?
Thank you very much. So I do not agree that other African countries will copy it totally, because trust me, I feel some African countries, like you've mentioned, are kind of lenient with their gambling tax. You've mentioned Mauritius, Seychelles. Even Nigeria's gambling tax is not that big. It's not that. I can give you what the taxes are. The problem we have in Nigeria is just the double taxation if you have dual licenses or you're trying to run a retail shop. But what I have seen that is happening in Africa is the segmentation, right? East African betting companies kind of like to follow suit, right? They kind of like to implement almost the same kind of taxes, right? Taxes on winnings, 20% increase. They are the ones that really don't have that stability for me, right? What we have in Nigeria is always, for example, the NLRC, the pinnacle taxation or regulator charges about 3% on your stake, right? They charge about 3% on your stake. That's 2% on stake, 1% for 3%, yeah, 2% on the stake and 1% for the trust fund, right? While states they charge 2.5% good cost levy on your stake, while NLRC does on GGR. Sorry, excuse me. So basically that's what we have here. So I don't think they're all going to copy it, right? I feel these things that they are doing right now might not work for them because a lot of companies will pull out. When you're already taking 30% of their incomes, they will pay tax, they will pay salaries, they would pay royalties to partners and the likes, right? How much is now the profit? So I feel that it's an East African issue, but right, we need not to lay low and say, oh, it will not affect the other side of Africa, right? So I think that is something that we should not do. But for me, I would want to suggest, I have never seen a regulator conference. I have never heard it before, where all regulators across the African continent or with the European continent have come together to discuss way forward on moving the industry, right? What we get is operators and third-party people trying to do conferences to speak, right, to educate on new insights on the industry, but we've never had a regulator symposium, right, where regulators would call for maybe the operators and will speak our mind, or where you get a stakeholder meetings opening in or holding in different areas. So I think we should also look at how we can get all regulators, probably in Africa and Europe, to come together for a section and where we can hear or air our own views and understand what their model or models of getting these figures for their taxation is, right? Is it based on the data that they've seen in terms of revenue that they are getting, or they feel that these companies are doing so well that they need to get more money from them, or they do not even want this investment in their country, right? So basically, those are the 3 action points for me that I feel we should take into the future. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Michael, for your insights. Yes, as much as they leverage, some countries leverage on others, it does not necessarily mean other countries is going to copy from the rest. Just to remind you that this webinar is sponsored by Aviatrix, which is a crash games. You can check them online and see what products they have. Just to mention that Dive Marketing, we are here, we help companies, we help brands to grow from a digital perspective, from online and on ground, as well as ATL. So we also help companies trying to come to African market with licensing and also go-to-market strategies. Just to mention, we've mentioned Mauritius and Seychelles as countries in Africa that has favorable environments in terms of taxation. What do you think, Felix, can other countries be able to benchmark from these countries in terms of favorable taxations to make sure that because there's potential in Africa, there's potential and immense potential in terms of gaming, and we've not even scratched the surface. And there's huge potential in African countries if this animal called taxation is addressed. I think the giant in the house is taxation, and so with the potential with the African markets, looking at it from the south, west, and the east, what do you make of other countries? What do you think? Do they need to borrow a leaf from these countries in terms of managing taxation in this country?
Yeah, so like you've mentioned, we have Mauritius, just to mention but a few. I also think, like David had said, Nigeria and Ghana and are basically countries that are, when it comes to taxation, are really doing a good job, basically because before they don't have this huge taxation like we have in East Africa right now. However, like from a benchmark perspective in Africa, I think strategies like countries like in Mozambique, whereby we have a special tax, whereby they have a concession with the player that is coming on board. They have a sit down, they have an agreement. So I think such initiatives are ways in which regulators can be able to have a sit down with the specific players, and in fact now for this matter specifically for investors that are coming in a specific country, like given for instance, let's say someone who is coming from Ukraine, he has no experience in Africa at all. So first of all, the best thing to do is have a sit down with this kind of investor, have a sit down with them, take them through the process, and maybe, because most of these investors, even from a nutshell, are really reading reading all these things off the media. They don't get it. Like it's good to have a sit down with them. And so for countries that are basically doing the double taxation, I think we can borrow and benchmark from the likes of Mozambique that are doing the agreements, just to mention but a few. Yeah, so those, for me, those are the countries that are right now favorable to do business in. However, on the flip side, the question that you ask yourself is, in these specific countries, do we have the appetite for betting? Because you may find that on these specific countries, the taxation is not that bad, but then when it comes to user participation on the actual activity itself, is it well well pushed, our players really participating and placing bets. So that's why we have, when it comes to the top of mind, we have the likes of, and no one is mentioning also South Africa as well. I think South Africa is really good when it comes to taxation as well. But then now, on the flip side again, we also have Somalia and Egypt, who basically, in Somalia, you're not allowed to, because of religion, you're not allowed to place bets. But then now, in countries like Egypt, it's possible for you to place bets. However, the downside is that the taxation is really bad, so that with the aim of disencouraging uh, betting in the country. So, just to answer, but a few, those are my thoughts on the question, Geoffrey.
Oh, okay, thank you, Mulandi. Just for our audience, keep sending those questions. We will address them at the end of the session in a couple of minutes. Any question that you need to be addressed by each by our panelists, just drop it on the chat and we will address it. David, Michael mentioned that he has never seen gaming boards in Africa, perhaps coming together to try to benchmark and come up with policies to make sure the environment is well harmonized. Do you think this is a possible way? There is an opportunity for these gaming boards, other than going to one country to benchmark and come and implement. Do you think they need to have a session to sit down and see how best they can manage operations and as much as also the revenue collection boards also sitting down to harmonize? And or do you think this is a case-to-case basis for each country, as much as revenue collection is concerned? Do you think the gaming boards needs to sit down and come up with policies that will make sure there is a smooth operation of the gaming industry in Africa?
Well, thank you, Geoffrey. I must tell you, 100% I concur with what he said. I agree with him 100%. Because as I said earlier on, I said the essence of all this is to learn, right? We must learn. And why the operators and the operators are meeting, doing conference, why we are doing this is to network, is for us to learn and to learn new things and how to we can run the operations, right? So the same thing applies to the regulators. So if you have a regulator conference or seminar or symposium globally, just the same way, Africa and the rest of it, everybody will learn, because this is it. The essence why we do business is to make profits, right? And also for the business to grow, right? So for government to take to tax also is for them also to increase their GDP, right? So it takes two to tango. It takes two to tango. So I think what Michael said is right. We need to do this. By so doing, we will all enjoy it at the end of the day, because it is painful when an organization. Okay, let me give you an example. You find out even in Africa, even in Nigeria, as we said, you find out most of the operators comes on board. Let me look, the local investors comes on board, and they don't spend 2 3 years. They go back, they shut down the business. Now, when they've initially, when they've in, when they initially used the money they were supposed to use to start up this operation, they've used this to acquire license. After acquiring the license, they now need money to run the operation. I mean, because most of them don't have the, well, I call it the insight or the budget, the big huge pocket to run this business, right? But you find out that by the process of acquiring licenses, they've paid to Lagos State, they've paid to the state, sorry, they've paid to the state, and they've paid to the federal government. At the end of the day, they won't have enough money to even kickstart the project. For those that don't have a huge pause, right? So I think we need to harmonize this for everybody to enjoy this, because if you check even in Africa, in Nigeria, you find out that most of the employment rate has increased in the gaming industry in Nigeria. Go and check. We have a lot of colleagues, a lot of friends working in the gaming industry, and they are doing very well. So if companies like this goes away, maybe foreign investors goes away, it will affect the business. right? And it will cause unemployment in the country. So, as I said, I concur with Michael. We need this. We need to we need to agree on what to do, and also to see how the regulators can meet and do meetings. Thank you.
Thank you for your insights, David. I agree. I think it is an opportunity for us and for governments for African countries to come together and try to see how to address the problems affecting the industry. But even as we gear towards conclusion, I just want to give each one of you a minute. What do you think is your recommendation to each to this particular continent, in as much as issues to do with tax management, tax environment is concerned? What is your recommendation to most of these countries? How do you think? What are your thoughts? If I can ask, like Felix, what is your thought in what are some of the recommendations that you recommend as much as far as this tax issue is concerned?
Okay, so these are my closing remarks in regards to this. So basically, I think taxation, like we've all been stating, is a good thing because again, it helps the economy to grow. However, we need to all have like a symposium and have a sit down so that all parties involved. So what I mean by all parties is we need to involve the gamblers themselves, that's the users. We need to involve all regulatory bodies, that's the taxman. We need to involve, uh, like in Kenya right now, we have the BCLB, also involve them as well, and the players themselves, that's the bookmakers or all gaming firms, casino, have conferences, public participation, and all this has been going on. So when you have all this and we have share our remarks and all, everyone comes up with their suggestions, we're able to have a well structured framework going forward. And because right now what we're noticing is each and every year the bills keep changing, the tax rates keep going up. So it's not so from even like I've been saying, from an investor perspective, you are not able to like ultimately say I'm going to invest in a specific country because I don't know in the coming year what will happen. So as much as you're going in, you're not going in with all your feet. You're going on maybe with one foot, just saying let me go and observe, and that's why you're seeing a lot of exits in Kenya right now. So that's what needs to be done. We all need to be given ears. All participants in the industry need to be heard, and I believe by that we'll be able to come up with a framework that will be long lasting and will last the test of time. Thank you.
David, can you give your closing remarks?
Okay, fine. Thank you, Geoffrey. All I have to say here is that in Africa, we need collaboration and research work, whereby countries can learn from experiences, conducting research and analyzing the impact of different taxation policies on the gambling sector. So, collaborator effort can help identify the best practice and the successful model and the potential areas for improvement. So, by so doing, this will help us in Africa to grow and also help investors to come in. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Michael, what is your closing remarks?
So for me, it's not all dooms. It's not all doom in Africa, right? Africa is a market that is yet to be fully utilized. We know that there is a lot of opportunities here, So we're just using this opportunity to plead to the government to see the positivity in this, the job creation, the alleviation of poverty, the positive impact on GDP. And they should not just focus on just what they stand to gain. It is about what the people, what the community, what the country, what the continent stands to gain, right? So that is it for me. Let them just take it easy, harmonize on this taxation thing, you know, do some research, you know, organize symposium and seminars, right? And carry the operators along, even in setting up committees to increase this taxation in this bill, give us a sense of ownership. I have experience across African continents. I've, you know, worked in Tanzania, gone to Kenya and the likes, right? Inclusion, you know, they should just include us in this, you know, let them hear from us in making these policies, let them see, you know, make plans. Even if you want to increase it, it should not just come immediately. Have a projection and say, oh, in the next 5 years, and these are your projections. You have inclusion in all these things. Basically give operators first year free, tax free, or 2 years tax free in your country based on XYZ criterias or XYZ reasons, right? And with all these initiatives, yeah, you get a better continent, a better opportunity for investors to come and do things the right way, not trying to cut corners in terms of taxes or evade taxes, or even in their structure and models of operation. So I think, yes, that, you know, it's not all doom. Like I said, there is still hope and opportunities for investors to come and do business in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Felix. I agree there is opportunity in Africa. It is not dumb as we ought to, we are thinking. There is opportunity for improvement. There is, we can be given a chance to transform the industry. The players who are in the industry, it's good to be included in most of these discussions. In most of those, there's room for more discussions to try and improve the industry. I just wanted to thank my panelists for taking the time to be part of this webinar. Thank you for everyone who has joined. Thank you to our sponsor, Afiatrix, the game, the Crash game. Thank you to iGaming. It is the main sponsor, the main organizer of these events. It is always good to to come together as experts and discuss the issues affecting the industry. Thank you, and I know there are subsequent ones engagement. We want to make sure we join and to contribute for the better part or better how to know how best we can improve this industry. So thank you to every one of you. If you have any question, you can send a message to the iGaming social media channels, and we are going to get back to you. Thank you for every one of you, and the next one will be communicated.